The rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the roof of Officer Mark Harlan's patrol car like a warning. Cedar Grove had always been a quiet town, the kind of place where doors were rarely locked and neighbors waved hello at strangers. Tonight, however, a storm had rolled in early, dark clouds, blotting out the moon and painting the streets in deep shadows. The usually familiar streets felt foreign, slippery with rainwater and littered with debris. Mark adjusted his grip on the steering wheel, glancing at Rex, his K9 partner. The German Shepherd sat alert in the passenger seat, ears twitching at every distant noise, eyes sharp in the dim glow of the dashboard. "Easy, Rex," Mark murmured, scratching the dog's wet neck. "Just another routine patrol." But even as he said it, something in the dog's stance told him otherwise. Rex's fur bristled and a low growl rumbled from his chest. The sound was subtle, almost swallowed by the rain, but Mark knew it well. It was the growl that always meant danger, the kind of danger no one could ignore. Mark steered the patrol car slowly down the alley behind the old laundromat. The flickering neon sign cast jagged shadows across the wet pavement. Trash cans rattled in the wind, and the rain pooled in rivulets around discarded cardboard boxes. Suddenly, Rex leapt to his feet, claws scraping the vinyl seat. Mark barely had time to react as the dog bolted through the half-open door of the car and disappeared into the night. "Rex, Rex, wait," Mark shouted, abandoning the car and sprinting after him. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, soaking through his uniform. His boots splashed through puddles as he chased the German Shepherd down the narrow alley. The dog's barks cut through the storm, sharp and urgent, echoing off the walls of abandoned buildings. Each bark carried a sense of dread, as if Rex had smelled something no human could yet perceive. Mark's heart pounded against his ribs. He had worked with Rex for 5 years, and in that time he had learned to trust every instinct the dog displayed. And tonight, Rex was insistent. He stopped abruptly by a rusted dumpster, ears pinned back, body tense. Mark skidded to a halt, rainwater soaking his uniform, and noticed a small pink shoe lying in the mud. A child's shoe, tiny, soaked, and abandoned. The sound came again, a soft, trembling whimper barely audible above the storm. Mark's stomach clenched. He dropped to his knees, reaching out, voice gentle. "Hey, are you okay?" The voice came back in shaky, breathless gasps, and the wet, muddy shape of a small child emerged from behind the dumpster. She was no more than 7 years old. Her hair was matted with rain, her bare legs covered in scratches, and her eyes wide with fear. She clutched at Rex's soaked fur like he was her lifeline. The dog growled softly, positioning himself protectively between Mark and the girl. Mark's training kicked in. He crouched lower, careful not to startle her. "It's okay. I'm a police officer. You're safe now. What's your name?" The girl only shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, blending with the rain. She pointed toward the shadowy tree line beyond the alley, trembling violently. Rex's hackles rose again, and a low growl escaped him, this one more urgent than before. Mark's stomach dropped. Something or someone was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting. He glanced around, rain pouring off his cap, water running into his eyes. The alley felt claustrophobic now, walls closing in with the oppressive darkness. Mark reached slowly into his pocket for his radio, his hands shaking from the cold and fear. "Dispatch officer in Cedar Grove Alley, possible child in distress. Requesting immediate backup," he said, voice taut. His eyes never left Rex, who now circled the girl protectively, growling low, hackles raised high. The little girl, still clinging to Rex, whispered a single word, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Him." Her small hand pointed toward the darkened edge of the alley, the place where streetlights failed to reach, where the shadows pooled like liquid. Mark's heart seized. He didn't need her to finish. He had worked countless cases involving children in danger. He had seen the aftermath of people who lurked in shadows waiting for the perfect moment. Suddenly, a metallic clatter echoed from the alley's far end. The girl gasped, gripping Rex's fur even tighter. The dog growled, low and guttural, a sound that made Mark's blood run cold. He drew his flashlight, beam slicing through the rain like a knife, illuminating overturned trash cans and the slick pavement. There, at the edge of the light, a figure moved, quick, jerky, indistinct, shrouded in the storm. Rex lunged forward, barking furiously, charging straight at the figure. Mark followed, running as fast as the rain allowed, his boots sliding in the mud. The figure darted into the shadows, and the alley seemed to stretch endlessly, the darkness swallowing the streetlights and the rain reflecting off puddles like shards of broken glass. Mark reached the end of the alley and froze. The figure had vanished. Only Rex remained, packing back and forth, teeth bared, eyes scanning every inch of the darkness. The little girl's sobs were barely audible over the pounding rain. Mark knelt beside her, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders, trying to offer warmth, safety, something that felt impossibly out of reach. "She's scared, Rex," Mark whispered, more to himself than to the dog. Rex's ears twitched, his head cocked toward the tree line. Mark followed the line of his gaze and froze. Beyond the alley, the forest loomed dark, thick, and foreboding, and somewhere inside he knew the danger was still moving. He tightened his grip on the girl's small hand. "It's going to be okay," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure it was true. The rain pounded down harder, turning the world into a blur of gray and black, and somewhere deep in the forest he could hear it, a faint, irregular sound, almost like someone breathing, but it wasn't human. Rex growled again, low and warning, every muscle coiled, ready to spring. Mark swallowed hard. He had faced many dangerous situations, but something about this night, this storm, this alley, made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He could feel it in his bones, the sense that this was just the beginning, that whatever had taken the little girl's safety had not finished yet. Mark glanced down at her face, streaked with mud and tears. "We'll get you out of this," he promised, though the words sounded hollow. The girl's eyes, wide and frightened, met his. Then suddenly she pointed again toward the forest, her small lips trembling, whispering, "He's coming back." Rex growled louder, teeth bared. Mark's pulse surged. Somewhere in the darkness, beyond the rain and the tree line, someone, or something, was moving toward them. And in that moment, Mark realized with chilling clarity that tonight, nothing in Cedar Grove would ever be the same. The storm roared, the alley echoed with the cries of the frightened child, and Rex stood, muscles tense, eyes blazing. Whatever danger lurked in the shadows, it was patient, it was cunning, and it was coming closer. And Mark, drenched to the bone, could only pray he was fast enough to stop it. The night was far from over, and the hunt had only just begun. The rain had eased into a soft drizzle, leaving the alley slick and glimmering under the flickering neon sign of the abandoned laundromat. Officer Mark Harlan knelt beside the little girl, shivering in his soaked uniform, his hands trembling as he tried to offer comfort. Rex, soaked and tense, stood like a guardian, ears flat and body rigid, watching the tree line where the shadows still seemed alive. The girl clutched the dog's fur with desperate fingers, trembling so violently that Mark feared she would break apart if he let go. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe," Mark whispered, voice strained. "Can you tell me your name?" The girl's wide eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. She shook her head slowly, pointing again toward the dark forest beyond the alley. Her small lips quivered and she whispered, "Him, he's there." Mark's stomach dropped. He had seen enough crime scenes to know the chilling weight of those two words. Whoever he was, he had been close enough to terrorize this little girl into silence. Mark glanced at Rex, whose low growl reverberated like a warning bell. The dog's gaze locked onto the tree line, muscles coiled, ready to spring. Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, officer in Cedar Grove Alley, requesting immediate backup, child in distress, possible abductor nearby. Over." His words felt inadequate. Nothing he could say would erase the fear in the little girl's eyes or the sense of menace lurking just beyond the light. From the shadows, a sudden movement caught Mark's eye. A figure, tall and partially obscured by darkness, darted between trees. He caught only a glimpse, a dark jacket, a hunched gait, hands moving erratically. His blood ran cold. This was the same presence the girl had been pointing at. Mark swallowed hard. "Rex," he said quietly, but the dog already knew what to do. With a burst of energy, Rex leapt into the dark, barking and growling. Mark raced after him, sloshing through puddles, his boots sinking into mud. The alley had given way to an overgrown path leading into the forest. Each step was a struggle, mud pulling at his legs, branches whipping his face. But Mark ignored the discomfort. Emily, the girl, was counting on him. As he broke through the last of the brush, he saw Rex at the edge of a small clearing, rigid teeth bared. And there she was, Emily. She crouched beneath a fallen tree branch, small body curled, arms wrapped around Rex's neck. Her face was streaked with mud and tears, eyes wide, reflecting both terror and relief. Mark dropped to his knees, careful not to startle her. "It's okay, you're safe now. My name's Officer Harlan. You're going to be okay." Emily's voice trembled, barely audible over the gentle patter of rain. He said he'd come back. He said I couldn't run forever." Mark's heart clenched. Whoever had done this was still out there, waiting, patient, watching. He looked around the clearing. The forest loomed like a wall of darkness, each tree a sentinel hiding potential danger. His instincts screamed that they were not alone. Suddenly, a twig snapped. Emily gasped, pressing herself closer to Rex. The dog's hackles rose and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Mark's eyes scanned the tree line, trying to pierce the gloom. A shadow shifted, too fast, too purposeful. He instinctively stepped in front of Emily, pulling his flashlight from his belt. The beam cut a narrow line through the trees, revealing only glistening leaves and tangled branches. Whoever had been here was clever, patient, and fast. Emily clung tighter to Rex, whispering, "He's hiding, I can feel him." Her voice was barely above a breath, yet every word carried the weight of terror. Mark knelt, putting a hand gently on her shoulder. "We're not going anywhere without you. Rex and I have you, okay? We've got you." Rex barked sharply, breaking the tension, and the sound seemed to make the shadows stir. A figure emerged from behind a tree, partially obscured, but the outline of a man was unmistakable. His jacket was soaked, hood pulled low, face partially hidden, but his intent was clear. Mark's pulse quickened. "Emily, stay behind me," he instructed, voice low but firm. His training kicked in, every sense heightened, every movement precise. He drew his taser, keeping the beam focused on the man while slowly backing toward Emily. The man froze, then lunged forward, eyes wild, hands outstretched. Rex barked and charged, teeth flashing, intercepting the figure before he could reach the girl. They collided with a thud, the man stumbling back as Rex growled, teeth locked on his sleeve. Mark rushed forward, adrenaline fueling him through the mud and rain, and tackled the man to the ground. Emily screamed, half from fear, half from relief, and pressed herself closer to Rex. The dog snapped at the attacker with precision, protecting her as Mark pinned the man's arms behind his back. The struggle was brief but intense. The man fought with the desperation of someone who had nothing to lose. Mark felt the weight of the rain, the mud, and the urgency pressing on him, but he refused to let go. Finally, the man stopped struggling, breathing heavily, his eyes wild. Mark's radio crackled, backup finally arriving. Shouts echoed from the distance as uniformed officers ran toward them, flashlights cutting through the storm. The man, realizing escape was impossible, let go, and Rex released him, backing up to stand between Emily and the threat. Mark looked down at the girl. She was trembling violently, tears running freely, but she smiled faintly at Rex, her lifeline. Thank you," she whispered, clutching the dog's wet fur. Mark's voice was low yet steady. "You're safe now, Emily. He can't hurt you anymore. We've got you." But even as he said it, a chill ran down his spine. Something about the man's eyes, the calculated way he had approached, suggested this was not over. Emily's small voice broke through his thoughts. He had a knife," she whispered, her lips quivered. "He said he'd come back." Mark swallowed hard. He looked at Rex, who had his gaze fixed on the tree line, growling softly but steadily, tail low and stiff. The dog had sensed it too. The danger was not gone. It had only retreated for now. Backup arrived fully and officers swarmed the clearing, securing the area, checking the perimeter. Medics moved toward Emily, wrapped her in blankets and checked her for injuries. Mark knelt beside her, watching her small chest rise and fall rapidly with fear and relief. Rex pressed close, shaking slightly, but eyes unwavering from the forest beyond. Mark's mind raced. Whoever this man was, whoever had been following Emily, had been cunning, patient, and terrifyingly bold. He had no idea why Emily had been targeted, only that the storm of the night had revealed a danger far greater than anyone in Cedar Grove had anticipated. Emily leaned against Rex, trembling. "Will he come back?" she asked, voice almost inaudible. Mark hugged her shoulder gently, trying to keep his own fear in check. "We'll make sure he doesn't," he promised. Yet in his heart, he knew that the night was far from over. Somewhere in the shadows, the threat lingered, patient and calculating, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still to come. Rex let out a low growl, the sound vibrating through the wet clearing. The little girl shivered, clutching him tighter. Mark's eyes scanned the tree line again, heart thudding. Whoever had done this, whatever evil had been stalking Emily, was still out there. And just as Mark was about to radio for updates, a faint rustling from deep within the forest made him freeze. Eyes wide, he gripped his flashlight, signaling to backup. Something, or someone, was moving toward them again, and this time it was coming faster. Emily pressed herself closer to Rex, whispering, "He's coming back." Mark's heart skipped a beat. He knew, with every fiber of his being, that the night's nightmare was far from over. And as Rex growled, bristling with the kind of intensity only years of training could produce, Mark realized that whatever awaited them in the dark, it would test both their courage and their resolve. The forest seemed to close in, shadows twisting like living things, rain dripping from every leaf like the ticking of a clock counting down to the next danger. Mark took a deep breath, gripped Rex's harness, and prepared himself for what was coming next. Because tonight, Cedar Grove had changed forever, and there was no turning back. The tree line loomed like a wall of shadows, the forest floor slick with rain and scattered leaves. Officer Mark Harlan tightened his grip on Rex's harness, heart hammering, as the little girl clung desperately to the dog. Every muscle in Rex's body was tense, ready to spring, and his low growls vibrated through the cold night air. Emily's fingers dug into his fur like a lifeline, wet hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with terror. The woods were alive with unseen movement, the rustle of branches, the snap of twigs underfoot, and Mark's senses screamed that danger was close, too close. "Stay close, Emily," Mark whispered, voice barely audible over the steady drip of rain from the canopy above. "We're going to get through this." Rex let out a sharp bark, leaping forward into the shadows. Mark followed, mud splashing with every step as he ran after his K9 partner. The rain had softened into a drizzle, but the forest was slick, the underbrush thick and treacherous. Every shadow seemed alive, twisting with movement just beyond the edge of his flashlight's beam. Ahead, Rex stopped suddenly, hackles raised, teeth bared, ears alert. A figure darted between the trees, quick, jerky, almost invisible in the dark. Mark's stomach tightened. That had to be him, the man who had terrorized Emily. The kidnapper's silhouette flickered between the trunks, arm outstretched as if reaching for something or someone. "Rex, stay sharp," Mark barked, his voice a mix of command and desperation. The dog lunged forward again, barking, a blur of black and gold through the wet underbrush. Mark pushed past a fallen branch, mud splattering across his uniform, and surged forward with adrenaline fueling him. The little girl's small voice called out, shaking and fearful, "He's going to get me." Mark's heart lurched. He had faced danger countless times, but hearing it in a child's voice, vulnerable, panicked, twisted something deep inside him. He forced himself to focus. He was her protector now. He had to be fast enough, smart enough, strong enough. Suddenly, the forest floor gave way beneath Mark's foot, and he stumbled, sprawling into a puddle of mud and rainwater. Pain shot up his wrist as he caught himself, but he pushed forward. Rex had already intercepted the man, teeth flashing, growling with the kind of ferocity only a police K-9 could summon. The attacker swung a metal pipe, but Rex dodged, snapping with precision. Mark scrambled to his feet, breath ragged, and pulled his flashlight upward to illuminate the scene. The man's face was twisted with fury, but his eyes betrayed fear. He realized Rex was not an ordinary dog, he was a trained protector, instinctively lethal when defending the vulnerable. Mark's radio squawked in his pocket, backup calling to ask for his location. He ignored it. There was no time for words. The danger was right here, right now. Emily screamed behind him, the sound raw and piercing, echoing through the trees. Rex barked sharply, snapping at the man, forcing him back a step. But the attacker wasn't done. He lunged again, swinging the pipe wildly. Rex dodged, but the man's momentum carried him forward, striking Rex's side with a sickening crack. The dog yelped, stumbling, but didn't release Emily. Mark's stomach sank. Rex was bleeding. Every instinct screamed to grab the man and pull him down, but the dog's courage inspired him. He sprinted forward, tackling the attacker to the ground. Mud and rain mixed with blood as the two men struggled, one human, one dog, locked in a deadly contest of wills. Emily sobbed, pressed to the damp forest floor, gripping Rex's fur tightly. "No, Rex," she cried, tears streaking her face. Mark's voice cracked as he shouted, "Hold on, Rex. You've got this." He slammed his shoulder into the man's side, pinning him just enough for Rex to release a warning growl that vibrated through the clearing. The attacker scrambled backward, limping, clutching his arm. Mark noticed then, the man was injured. Somehow in the chaos, Rex had bitten him just enough to slow him down. Blood streaked the man's sleeve and panic flashed in his eyes. He was fast, but desperation made him sloppy. Suddenly, Mark realized something horrifying. The man had Emily's small backpack in his other hand. His fingers squeezed the straps like a vice. Without it, he would flee. But with it, he still had leverage. The thought made Mark's stomach churn. He had seconds to act. Rex barked again, teeth bared, muscles trembling with effort, yet refusing to collapse. Mark dove forward, grabbing the backpack, wrenching it free from the man's grasp. Emily's shriek turned into a gasp of relief. The little girl's fingers closed around the bag as she hugged it to her chest, clutching her lifeline. Backup sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder with each second. The man looked toward the sound, panic overtaking his rage. In that instant, he bolted, sprinting deeper into the forest, leaving a trail of mud and blood in his wake. Mark sank to his knees, sweat mixing with rainwater and mud, his chest heaving. He glanced down at Rex. The dog lay on the ground, chest heaving, fur matted with rain and blood, eyes dimmed but alive. Mark reached out, touching the dog's side, and whispered, "You're a hero, buddy. You saved her." Emily scrambled to her feet, her small hands resting gently on Rex's head. "You're okay, Rex. You saved me," she whispered, voice trembling but filled with awe. Tears streaked down her cheeks, mixing with the mud, but her eyes shone with relief. Mark looked around the forest, chest tight. Somewhere out there, the man was still running, still dangerous and still determined. But for now, Emily was safe and Rex had held the line. He allowed himself a brief moment of relief, though it was fragile. The storm had passed, but the night's danger had only partially ended. Rex struggled to his feet, leaning heavily against Mark for support. Every movement was slow, labored, but his tail wagged slightly, a signal that he understood the immediate threat was over. Emily hugged the dog tightly, burying her face in his wet fur. Mark pulled Emily close, wrapping his jacket around her shivering body. "We're not out of this yet," he said, voice low but determined. "That man is still out there, and we need to get you somewhere safe." Emily's lips trembled as she nodded, holding Rex close. Will he come back?" she asked, voice small and frightened. Mark's jaw tightened. "If he does, we'll be ready," he promised, though deep down he knew that the night was far from over. Somewhere in the shadows, patience and malice lingered, waiting for a moment to strike again. He radioed dispatch again, giving coordinates and describing the suspect's escape route. Officers responded immediately, sirens approaching, lights cutting through the foggy forest. Mark kept his gaze fixed on the tree line, watching for movement. Rex's ears twitched, and his low growl continued, a constant reminder that the threat, though distant, was still very real. Emily pressed closer to Mark and Rex, small hands clutching the dog's fur like a lifeline. Her sobs had softened, but fear still clung to her like the dampness in her hair and clothes. Mark glanced down, brushing mud from her cheek. "We're going to make it," he said, though every instinct screamed caution. From somewhere deep within the forest, a twig snapped sharply, echoing like a gunshot in the quiet aftermath of the chase. Mark froze, eyes scanning the shadows, heart pounding. Rex stiffened, hackles rising. Emily gasped and clutched the dog tighter. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and then from the darkness, a faint, malicious laugh echoed, a sound that made Mark's blood run cold. Someone was watching, waiting, and patient beyond reason. Mark tightened his grip on Rex's harness. "Hold on, Emily. Whatever comes next, we face it together." And with that, the forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows deepening, the danger lurking just beyond sight. The night was far from over. The chase had only begun. The forest around Cedar Grove had grown unnervingly silent. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving slick leaves and mud that clung to every step Mark Harlan took. He tightened his grip on Rex's harness, glancing down at the little girl pressed to his side. Emily's small arms trembled around the dog's neck, her face streaked with mud and tears, and her eyes darted into the darkness as if expecting the threat to appear at any moment. Rex growled low, every muscle coiled like a spring, and Mark knew instinctively that the man, the kidnapper, was still close. Somewhere in the dense tree line he watched, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Mark's flashlight cut a narrow beam through the dark, wet forest. Every shadow seemed to move, twisting and stretching like living things. The snap of a twig echoed unnaturally loud, and Emily gasped, pressing closer. Mark whispered, "Stay behind me, Emily. Don't move." His heart pounded. He had faced dangerous men before, but never one so unpredictable, so desperate. Suddenly, a figure erupted from the underbrush. The man charged, clutching a metal pipe in one hand, eyes wild with fury. "Give me the girl," he shouted, his voice dripping with menace and desperation. Mark stepped in front of Emily, taser drawn, heart racing, but he knew he would not be able to stop the attack alone. Rex sprang forward with a ferocity that made Mark catch his breath. Teeth flashed, fur bristled, and the dog collided with the man mid-step. The metal pipe swung, striking Rex across the ribs with a sickening thud. The dog yelped but did not release Emily. Mark's pulse surged as he barreled forward, tackling the man to the wet ground. Mud and rain mixed with blood as the struggle intensified. The man fought with a feral strength, swinging wildly, trying to free himself. Mark could feel Rex straining beside him, muscles trembling, teeth sinking into the man's sleeve. The scene was chaotic, branches snapping, leaves flying, and the rain slicking everything into a dangerous, slippery mess. Emily shrieked, the sound raw and piercing. "Rex, no!" Her small hands gripped his fur tighter as if she could somehow lend him strength. Mark's jaw tightened. He had to protect both of them, and he had only seconds to think. The man twisted violently, striking Rex again, and the dog stumbled. Mark yelled, throwing his full weight onto the man, driving him into the muddy ground. "Stop it," Mark bellowed. "Let her go." But the man's eyes burned with a frightening combination of rage and panic. He was cornered, yet desperate, and that made him unpredictable. Rex, despite the injury, lunged again, teeth locked on the man's arm. Mark felt a flash of both pride and fear. The dog's loyalty and courage were unmatched, but every second risked grave injury. The man screamed, struggling violently, and Mark's heart lurched at the sound of bone or muscle straining under Rex's bite. Emily whimpered, pressing herself closer to the dog, eyes wide and fearful. Mark's voice was steady but low, guiding her without drawing attention away from the struggle. "It's okay, Emily. Rex is keeping you safe. He's a hero. Just stay calm." The man, realizing he could not overpower both Mark and Rex, made a sudden, desperate move. He swung the pipe again, grazing Rex's side, and stumbled backward, howling in pain. For a brief second, everything froze. Mark's mind raced. Emily's life hung in the balance. With one final, desperate push, the man lunged toward Emily. Mark threw himself in front, chest pressed to the attacker, pinning him down. Rex, bloodied but unyielding, barked and lunged one last time, teeth snapping mere inches from the man's face. The sheer determination in the dog's stance, his unwavering focus on protecting the girl, was breathtaking. The struggle ended in a flurry of mud, rain, and shouted commands. The man, battered and bleeding, finally released Emily and scrambled backward, clutching his side. Rex's growl never ceased, muscles taut, eyes locked on the fleeing figure. Mark's body trembled from exertion, adrenaline still coursing through every vein. He grabbed Emily, holding her tightly. "You're safe now, Emily. He can't hurt you anymore," Mark said, voice low but firm. The little girl buried her face in Rex's wet fur, sobs racking her small body. Her arms clung to the dog as if letting go would mean losing the last ounce of safety in the world. Mark glanced at Rex, who staggered, breathing heavily, fur soaked and matted with rain and blood. "You okay, buddy?" he asked, voice breaking slightly. The dog let out a hoarse whine, but his tail gave a weak wag. He had done what no one else could, protected Emily at all costs. The forest remained silent, but Mark could sense movement beyond the tree line. He knew the man had not completely given up. Desperation made him dangerous. The adrenaline in Mark's veins surged again, his mind calculating every possibility. Backup was on the way, sirens faintly cutting through the distance, but the man could disappear into the darkness before anyone arrived. Emily, still trembling, whispered, "He's going to come back, isn't he?" Her voice was small, but each word carried the weight of terror. Mark swallowed hard, brushing mud from her wet hair. "If he does, we'll be ready," he promised, though uncertainty gnawed at his gut. The man's patience and cunning had been apparent from the start. He would not vanish entirely. Rex let out a low growl, muscles tensing again as if sensing the lingering threat. Mark patted the dog's head, trying to steady both him and himself. He could feel Emily shivering against his chest, the fear radiating from her as palpable as the cold rain. Suddenly, from deep within the forest, a snapping sound echoed, a branch breaking under weight heavier than a person. Mark's eyes widened, scanning the darkness. Rex stiffened beside him, ears flat, hackles raised. Emily gasped, pressing herself against the dog. Mark's hand instinctively went to his radio, but he stopped mid-motion. The sound was too close. The attacker was returning, or someone else had emerged from the shadows. His pulse thundered in his ears. Rex barked, sharp and commanding, his fierce determination unwavering. Emily clung tighter, whispering, "Rex, don't let him get me." Mark's chest tightened. The words burned like fire in his mind. He had trained for dangerous situations, but the stakes had never been higher. This was no longer about protocol or procedure. This was about survival, Emily's, Rex, and his own. The sound of crunching leaves grew louder, and Mark realized with chilling clarity that the man, or some new threat, was coming closer. Rex growled, teeth bared, muscles trembling but unmoving. Emily's eyes widened in terror. Mark tightened his grip on her small hand. "Stay behind Rex. Whatever happens, stay with him." His words were both promise and command. From the shadows, a figure suddenly burst forward, a silhouette obscured by darkness and rain. Mark's heart leapt. Rex lunged, yelping and snapping, as Mark prepared to confront the threat head-on. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The rain fell in heavier streaks, drumming on the leaves, as Mark realized that this fight was far from over, and the night would test their courage in ways they could not yet imagine. The forest around Cedar Grove was a mess of shadows, mud, and broken branches. Rainwater dripped from the trees, soaking Mark Harlan and Emily through their jackets, pooling at their boots. Every breath felt heavy, every movement exhausting, but Mark refused to slow. Rex, bleeding from multiple wounds but unwavering, stayed close to Emily, muscles trembling but eyes sharp and focused. They had survived the first confrontation, but Mark knew instinctively that the danger was far from over. The attacker had vanished into the shadows, but the fear in Emily's small eyes told him that he would not give up. "Emily, stay close," Mark urged, voice taut with urgency. "Rex and I have you. No one's going to touch you again." Emily clung tighter to Rex's fur, wet hair plastered to her face, teeth chattering. Her small fingers dug into the dog's soaked coat, as though gripping him harder could keep the terror away. "He's coming back, I know he is," she whispered, voice barely audible over the soft rain and rustling leaves. Mark's heart clenched. The little girl's fear was palpable, and he could feel it in every nerve ending. He had faced dangerous criminals before, but nothing compared to the helplessness in a child's eyes when facing an unknown predator. He glanced down at Rex, whose low growl rumbled beneath his chest, alert and ready. The dog's courage inspired Mark to push forward, despite fatigue and the growing pain in his ribs from the earlier struggle. Mark scanned the surrounding woods, flashlight slicing through the shadows. Somewhere in the dense forest, movement shifted, twigs snapped, leaves rustled. The attacker was close, patient, and calculating. Mark's radio crackled with the distant sound of sirens, but the terrain delayed help. He could not rely on backup to reach them in time. This was on him and on Rex. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, limping but determined, clutching a knife in one hand. The man's eyes were wild, face pale, and every muscle in his body screamed desperation. "Give me the girl," he yelled, voice shaking with rage and panic. Mark's chest tightened. His hands shook, but he forced himself to be steady. "Stay behind me, Emily. Do exactly what I say," he instructed. He raised his flashlight to illuminate the man while keeping one hand ready on his taser. Rex barked, a fierce, guttural sound that reverberated through the forest. The dog lunged forward despite his wounds, teeth bared, eyes blazing. Emily gasped, burying her face in the dog's fur, hands clutching tightly. The attacker swung the knife recklessly, but Rex intercepted, dodging and snapping, refusing to yield. Mark ran forward, tackling the man to the muddy ground. The knife clattered to the side, and the three of them tumbled into a mess of mud, leaves, and rain. Mark pinned the man, struggling to control him, while Rex snarled, teeth locked on the attacker's arm. The man writhed violently, trying to break free, but Mark's grip and Rex's ferocity were unstoppable. Emily sobbed, pressed to Rex's side, trembling violently. "No, Rex, don't let him," she cried. Her voice cracked the tension in the forest, reminding Mark of the stakes. This wasn't just another call, this was her life. The man's desperation reached a fever pitch. He swung again, attempting to break free, but Rex lunged, biting with precision, forcing him to release his hold. Mark scrambled to his feet, dragging the attacker into a sitting position, mud sliding down his uniform. He glanced down at Rex, panting heavily, fur matted with blood and rain, yet standing resolute. "Good boy," Mark whispered, though his voice was shaky. Emily clung to Rex, shivering but safe for now. Mark quickly scanned the area. The man had a hunting knife in one hand, and Mark realized he had been lucky to prevent a worse outcome. He radioed in, giving coordinates and describing the attacker's movements. "Backup is close, but we need extraction now," he said, voice taut with urgency. From the forest behind, faint sirens began to wail, growing louder with each passing second. The attacker's eyes flicked toward the sound. Panic overtook his rage. Mark seized the moment. "He's cornered, don't let him escape," he shouted. The man's gaze darted wildly, calculating an escape. He lunged suddenly, trying to bolt deeper into the forest. Rex barked, snapping at his heels. Mark dove, tackling him back into the mud. The struggle was vicious. Rainwater and blood mixed, forming a slick, treacherous surface. The man twisted violently, but Mark held him, muscles straining, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing like wildfire. Emily watched with wide eyes, clutching Rex as if the dog were a shield. "Please, don't let him take me," she whispered, voice trembling. Mark's throat tightened. He couldn't let her fear become reality. Not tonight. Finally, with the combined force of Mark and Rex, the attacker was subdued, pinned to the ground as the first backup officers arrived. Flashlights cut through the forest, and uniformed officers quickly restrained him, handcuffs clicking into place. He thrashed briefly, then slumped, defeated, eyes darting with anger and fear. Mark knelt beside Emily, brushing mud and rain from her face. "You're safe now," he said softly, though the tension in his body remained taut. "No one can hurt you anymore." Emily's small hands clutched Rex, tears running freely, but relief began to replace fear. Rex lay down, trembling but alert, his side bleeding but unbroken. Mark's hand rested on the dog's shoulder, murmuring, "You did it. You saved her." The dog's eyes met his, filled with loyalty and exhaustion. Emily whispered, "Thank you, Rex. I knew you'd save me." Mark glanced around the forest, breathing heavily. Somewhere in the darkness, the storm of the night had left its mark. Branches were broken, leaves scattered, and mud clung to everything. But more importantly, Emily had survived. The man was restrained, the immediate danger gone, yet a lingering unease remained. Emily's voice broke the silence. "Will he come back?" she asked, small and fearful. Mark swallowed hard. "If he does, we'll be ready," he promised, though deep down, he knew the night was far from over. The man's desperation had been evident, patience and cunning made him dangerous. Rex growled softly, alert even in exhaustion. Emily hugged him tightly, burying her face in his wet, bloodied fur. Mark brushed mud from her hair, shivering from both cold and adrenaline. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next movement, the next threat. Backup arrived fully, lights flashing, sirens piercing the damp night. Officers guided Mark and Emily out of the tree line, placing them on safer ground. Medics rushed to check both Emily and Rex. The dog had several deep cuts and bruises but was alive. Emily was soaked, terrified and exhausted, but physically unharmed. Mark knelt beside them, eyes scanning the dark forest. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of the flashlights and sirens, the threat lingered. The man's desperation, his wild determination, had left a mark that would not fade easily. But for now, Emily was safe. Rex lay down beside her, panting heavily, fur matted with mud and blood. Emily whispered into his ear, voice soft but full of awe, "You're my hero, Rex, my real hero." Mark took a deep breath, looking up at the shadowed tree line one last time. The night had tested them all, and while this chapter had ended in safety, the lingering fear of what could come next remained. And deep in the dark forest, where shadows still hid and the rain dripped softly from the canopy, he knew this story was far from over. Because in Cedar Grove, the night had left a mark on everyone, and the race against time was not yet finished. The rain had stopped, leaving the forest around Cedar Grove slick and heavy with mist. Every branch, leaf, and puddle reflected the pale glow of flashlights from the arriving officers. Mark Harlan crouched beside Emily, brushing the mud from her hair, while Rex stayed at her side, muscles still tense, fur matted and soaked, eyes scanning the surrounding shadows like a sentinel refusing to rest. The little girl shivered, both from the cold and from the memory of the attacker's wild eyes and violent strength. "You did so well, Emily," Mark whispered, trying to soothe her trembling body. "You're safe now. We've got you." Emily clung to Rex's soaked coat, her small hands pressing against the dog's chest. "But he's still out there, isn't he?" Her voice was small, fearful, almost swallowed by the foggy night. Mark swallowed hard. He didn't answer immediately. He had hoped the man's capture would end the threat, but a gnawing unease told him otherwise. The forest was dark, thick, and full of hiding places. One desperate, cunning individual could vanish into these shadows in seconds, and someone or something was still watching. Rex growled low, the sound vibrating through the misty night. Mark instinctively scanned the tree line. The dog's gaze was fixed, unblinking, on a cluster of trees to the north. Mark's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed that the attacker might have had an accomplice, or worse, that he had left behind another trap. Officers were securing the restrained man, calling in reports and radioing for further backup. Mark glanced down at Emily. "We're going to move you to safety," he said gently, his hand still resting on her shoulder. She nodded, eyes wide, still gripping Rex tightly. "But we're not leaving yet," he added quietly. "Rex senses something, and so do I." The forest seemed to close in, fog curling between the trees, turning shadows into shapes that weren't there, or maybe were. Mark led Emily and Rex cautiously along a muddy trail, flashlight cutting through the mist. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made Emily jump. Her small voice whispered, "He's coming back, I know he is," echoing the same fear she had expressed earlier. Mark's mind raced. He knew the forest well, but in darkness like this, the familiar became unfamiliar. He tightened his grip on Rex's harness, allowing the dog to guide them, instincts sharp, every movement precise. They had to reach the clearing where backup had established a safe perimeter, but the forest was treacherous, slick, and full of surprises. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic sound echoed, a branch snapping under weight heavier than a deer. Mark froze, heart pounding. Rex's hackles rose, ears flat, teeth flashing in the dim flashlight glow. Emily pressed closer to the dog, small hands clutching fur like a lifeline. From the shadows, movement emerged. It wasn't the captured attacker. This figure was smaller, lighter, moving quickly, almost silently. Mark's flashlight swept the area, catching a glimpse of a face partially hidden beneath a hood. A shiver ran down his spine. Someone else had been in the forest, watching, waiting, patient enough to avoid detection until now. "Stay behind me, Emily," Mark said, voice low but commanding. "Do not move, Rex has you." The little girl nodded, teeth chattering, eyes wide with terror. Rex growled, muscles coiled, ready to spring. The figure darted forward, then paused at the edge of the flashlight beam, revealing a young man, barely older than a teenager. His hands twitched nervously, and Mark could see the glint of something metallic in his hand. A small blade, perhaps, or a tool meant for intimidation. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, almost pleading, yet Mark felt the dangerous tension radiating from him. "Freeze, step back," Mark shouted, keeping his stance firm, voice cutting through the fog. The figure hesitated, body tense, unsure whether to fight or flee. Emily whimpered, clutching Rex, and the dog responded with a low, warning growl. Mark could feel every muscle in Rex's body ready to act at a moment's notice. He kept his flashlight steady, illuminating the figure, and tried to gauge the boy's intentions. "Who are you?" Mark demanded, voice sharp. "What are you doing here?" The boy swallowed, eyes darting from Rex to Mark to Emily, breathing ragged, panic-stricken. I'm not him," the boy stammered, voice shaking. I was just trying to help." Mark's pulse didn't slow. "Help? In the middle of the forest at night with a knife?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. Rex growled louder, sensing the tension, body taut. The boy flinched. Before Mark could speak again, movement in the mist caught his attention, another shadow, larger, moving fast. His heart skipped a beat. The captured attacker's accomplice, or had the man never been alone? He couldn't tell. But one thing was certain, Emily and Rex were still in danger. "Emily, stay behind Rex," Mark shouted, gripping the dog's harness tightly. The little girl nodded, trembling, burying her face in fur. Rex bristled, growling, every sense alert. The shadowed figure approached rapidly. Mark braced himself, muscles coiled for action. Rex lunged, teeth flashing, intercepting the threat with the precision only a trained police dog could manage. Mark followed, tackling the figure into the mud, a flurry of rain, leaves, and chaos. The smaller boy screamed in terror, thrashing wildly. Mark pinned him, keeping his focus sharp. "Who sent you?" he demanded, voice cutting through the storm's remnants. The boy's eyes filled with panic. I do know, I was told to watch, just watch." His voice trembled. I didn't hurt her." Rex growled low, standing between Mark and the boy, still alert for any other threats. Emily clutched the dog, whispering softly, "It's okay, you saved me again, Rex." Mark's chest tightened. Every word, every breath, every movement mattered now. The forest was no longer just a place of fear. It was a trap, layered with threats they could not yet see. Backup officers finally caught up, lights cutting through the mist, sirens faint but growing. They secured the boy, questioning him, while Mark held Emily and checked Rex's wounds. Blood streaked the dog's fur, cuts and bruises marking the heroism of his night's battle. Emily pressed her face into Rex's neck, whispering again, "You're my hero, you saved me." Mark's hand rested on the dog's shoulder. "You did more than anyone could have expected, buddy," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. The forest remained ominously quiet, fog curling around the trees, shadows hiding unknown dangers. Mark knew with certainty that this night's terror had not fully ended. The captured attacker, the mysterious boy, the shadows still lingering, they were all pieces of a story far from complete. Mark glanced down at Emily. "We're going to get you somewhere safe," he said softly. Her small nod was barely visible, but her grip on Rex's fur never loosened. Mark took a deep breath. Somewhere in the dark, the hidden threat lingered, patient, dangerous, and silent. And he knew one undeniable truth. The night had not finished testing them yet. The forest of Cedar Grove seemed alive with shadows, each tree a silent sentinel watching the chaos of the night unfold. The mist curled between the trunks, wrapping the forest in a ghostly haze. Officer Mark Harlan's heart raced, muscles coiled like steel, as he guided Emily and Rex along the muddy trail toward the clearing where backup had gathered. Every step was deliberate, calculated. He knew the man who had tried to abduct Emily was patient, cunning, and still out there, lurking somewhere in the dark, waiting for another chance. Emily clutched Rex's fur, small hands trembling. "He's still here," she whispered, eyes wide and terrified. Rex growled low in response, hackles raised, ears flat. Mark tightened his grip on the dog's harness, nodding slightly. "I know, Emily, but we're ready this time." Ahead, the clearing opened, illuminated by the flickering lights of police vehicles and officers moving in coordinated formation. But even with the perimeter secured, Mark sensed a presence beyond the beams of light, something hidden, calculating, deadly. Suddenly, a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. The attacker's voice rang out, sharp and full of menace. "You can't protect her forever, Harlan." He stepped from the tree line, holding a small knife in one hand, eyes wild, face smeared with mud and rain. "She's mine." Mark stepped forward, positioning himself between Emily and the man. Rex growled, low and menacing, ready to strike. "Stay behind Rex, Emily. Don't move," Mark commanded. His voice carried authority, but beneath it was the raw tension of fear and adrenaline. He knew every second counted. The man lunged suddenly, knife swinging. Rex reacted instantly, teeth flashing, intercepting the attack with precision and courage that left Mark breathless. Emily screamed, pressing herself into Rex's side. Mark leapt, tackling the attacker to the ground, mud and rain mixing with blood as they collided. The struggle was fierce, violent, and chaotic. The attacker fought with desperation, thrashing violently, swinging the knife in wide arcs. Rex snapped, dodged, and lunged, his body moving with trained perfection to shield Emily. Mark's muscles screamed in protest, pain radiating through his arms and shoulders as he wrestled the man into submission. The forest echoed with the sounds of battle, Rex's growls, Emily's terrified cries, and the clash of bodies in the mud. Emily whimpered, clutching the dog's fur tighter. Don't let him hurt me," she pleaded. Mark's jaw tightened. He would not allow it, not tonight. Finally, with a coordinated effort born of sheer willpower and instinct, Mark pinned the attacker, holding him against the wet earth. Rex stood over them, growling, eyes fixed on the man with unwavering vigilance. The knife clattered to the ground, skidding into the mud. The attacker's resistance faltered, replaced by a mix of fear and rage. Backup officers rushed in, handcuffs ready, and secured the man. He struggled briefly, but the combined force of trained officers, Mark and Rex, made further resistance impossible. He was restrained, defeated, yet his eyes still burned with malice. Mark exhaled, chest heaving, and turned to Emily. She clung to Rex, small body shaking, tears streaming down her face. You saved me, Rex," she whispered, voice trembling. The dog nuzzled her, fur wet and matted, breathing heavy but proud. Mark knelt beside them, brushing mud and rain from Emily's hair. "You're safe now," he said softly. "He can't hurt you anymore." Emily pressed her face into Rex's neck, small hands clutching him tightly. Mark's chest tightened at the sight. The bond between the girl and her protector was unbreakable, forged in the crucible of terror and bravery. The clearing, now bathed in the glow of floodlights and sirens, felt surreal. Officers moved efficiently, securing the area, taking statements and tending to the wounded. But Mark's eyes remained on the tree line, alert, wary. He had learned that night that danger was patient, cunning, and often hidden until it was too late. Rex lowered his body slightly, still growling, still alert. Emily whispered, "I knew you'd save me, I just knew it." Her small voice was filled with awe and relief. Mark placed a reassuring hand on the dog's shoulder. "You did it, buddy. You saved her. All of us, really." The restrained attacker was finally placed into the police vehicle. Mark watched, a lingering unease gnawing at him. Somewhere out there, darkness remained. Shadows shifted, the forest waiting silently for nightfall. Yet in that moment, Emily was safe. Rex had proven his heroism, and the immediate threat was contained. Emily's voice broke through his thoughts. Will he come back?" she asked, still trembling. Mark knelt to her level, looking into her fearful, tear-streaked eyes. "We'll make sure he can't," he promised. "You're not alone, Emily. We've got you." Rex let out a soft whine, nudging Emily gently, sensing her lingering fear. She hugged him, burying her face in his wet fur. Mark smiled faintly, despite the lingering tension. The bond between the girl and the dog had saved her life. As officers led them to safety, Mark glanced back toward the forest, the tree line dark and foreboding. Every instinct screamed that the night was not fully over. Danger could still be lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness. He gripped Rex's harness tighter. "Stay alert, buddy," he murmured. Emily, now wrapped in blankets and guided by medics, kept one hand on Rex's back, refusing to let go. Mark walked beside them, vigilant, aware that their journey was far from finished. He knew that while the attacker had been captured, the scars left by fear, courage, and survival would remain. The forest behind them whispered in the wind, leaves rustling like ghostly voices, shadows shifting even in the bright lights of the clearing. Mark's gaze scanned every tree, every shadow, every movement. He would not be caught off guard again. Emily looked up at him, small eyes filled with both fear and trust. "I'm safe now, right?" she asked softly. Mark nodded firmly. "Yes, Emily, you're safe, and Rex, he'll always protect you." The little girl hugged the dog tightly, whispering words only she and Rex could share. Mark felt a swell of pride and relief, knowing that, for now, the nightmare had ended. But deep inside, he knew that Cedar Grove's dark night had tested them all in ways that would linger forever. Rex gave one last low growl, scanning the darkness as if sensing unseen eyes. Mark's hand rested on his shoulder. "We did it, buddy," he said. "We survived. We protected her." And for the first time that night, amidst mud, rain, and fear, a sense of calm settled over the clearing. The storm had passed. The terror had ended for now. But the forest held its secrets, and Mark knew one thing with certainty. The darkness would always be there, waiting, patient, and ready. And as Emily clung to Rex, safe for the moment, Mark realized that their story had only just begun. The night was quiet now, but the memory of courage, fear, and loyalty burned brighter than any shadow. The first pale light of dawn filtered through the misty treetops of Cedar Grove, painting the forest in a ghostly silver. The rain had ceased, leaving the ground slick and muddy, the leaves glistening like scattered emeralds in the soft morning light. Officer Mark Harlan, soaked and exhausted, guided Emily and Rex toward the waiting ambulance and police vehicles. Though the night's terror had ended, The echoes of fear, courage, and determination still resonated in every corner of the clearing. Emily clung to Rex's damp, matted fur, her small hands pressing into his chest as though he were the only solid anchor in a world that had gone mad. Her eyes, wide and fearful the night before, now shimmered with a mix of relief and lingering panic. "Rex, you really saved me," she whispered, voice trembling but filled with awe. Mark smiled faintly, brushing mud from her hair. "You were never alone, Emily. He gestured to the captured attacker, "can't hurt you anymore. Not now, not ever." Rex gave a soft whine, eyes flicking to the forest one last time, as if ensuring no danger remained hidden in the shadows. His chest heaved, muscles trembling from exhaustion, but he remained alert, loyal, and vigilant. The hero of the night, unwilling to fully relax until Emily was completely safe. The ambulance team approached, ready to check Emily and attend to her small injuries. Mark knelt beside her, reassuring her, guiding her gently into the vehicle. The little girl hesitated for a moment, refusing to let go of Rex. The dog lowered his head, letting her wrap tiny arms around his neck one last time. "We'll be together, Rex," she whispered. Mark's chest tightened at the sight. There was something profoundly moving about a child relying on a dog's courage for survival, a bond forged in blood, mud, and fear. He patted Rex's head, voice thick with emotion. "You did it, buddy. You kept her safe. You're a hero." Emily finally climbed into the ambulance, still clutching Rex's fur. Mark gave her a reassuring smile. "We'll get you checked out and you'll be okay." She nodded, eyes brimming with tears, relief washing over her small frame like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Rex followed closely, though officers gently guided him to stay outside the vehicle for safety. He lingered by the door, low growls vibrating in his chest as he kept watch over Emily. Mark placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. "Go on, buddy. She's safe now. We've done it." The forest, once alive with menace, now seemed eerily quiet. The mist curled among the trees, leaving shadows that no longer threatened but whispered of the night's harrowing events. Mark looked back toward the tree line, toward the dark depths where danger had once lurked, and exhaled. The attacker had been captured. The boy who had lingered in the shadows was secured and questioned. For the first time, the immediate threat had vanished. Emily sat in the ambulance, eyes still wide, small hands gripping a blanket. She looked at Rex, brushing his wet, matted fur. "I love you, Rex," she whispered, voice breaking. The dog nuzzled her gently, letting out a soft whine of acknowledgement. Mark's heart tightened at the sight, the bond between child and dog stronger than any fear, stronger than any threat that night had held. Paramedics examined Emily, brushing off mud and checking for bruises and minor injuries. She had scratches from branches, a few scrapes on her knees, but otherwise she was miraculously unharmed. Mark watched, pride and relief washing over him. The night had tested them all, but Emily had survived. And it was all because of courage, instinct, and the unwavering loyalty of a dog who refused to give up. Rex sat nearby, panting heavily, body still trembling from exertion. Mark knelt beside him, whispering, "You saved her life tonight. Don't forget it. You're a hero and everyone knows it." Rex's ears flicked toward Mark, eyes softening, yet alert, still watching the shadows, still guarding Emily even when the danger had passed. As dawn broke fully, the sun cut through the mist, scattering golden light across the muddy ground. Officers took statements, backup secured the scene, and the captured attacker was taken away. Cedar Grove seemed to breathe again, the forest exhaling after a night of fear, chaos, and heroism. Emily, wrapped in blankets and comforted by medics, glanced at Mark. "Will I ever see him again?" she asked, small and trembling. Mark shook his head gently. "No, Emily, he's going to jail. You'll be safe from him forever." Her small hands brushed over Rex's fur, brushing away a mix of mud and dried blood. "Thank you, Rex. You were my hero," she whispered again. The dog nudged her gently, letting her know he had been and always would be there for her. Mark watched the scene, chest heavy with emotion. He had faced many dangerous situations in his career, but nothing compared to the raw intensity of watching a child fight for survival and seeing a dog rise to meet every threat without hesitation. Courage and loyalty had triumphed in the darkest of nights. The ambulance doors closed and the vehicle slowly moved toward safety, Emily watching Rex through the window. The dog remained by the edge of the clearing for a moment, tail low but alert, before following Mark toward the vehicles. Officers clapped quietly, some patting Rex's head, acknowledging the bravery that had saved a life. Mark knelt beside Rex, brushing more mud from his fur. "You did everything tonight," he said, voice thick. "You saved her life. You were fearless." Rex leaned against him, exhausted but steady, eyes reflecting trust and loyalty. The bond between officer, child, and dog had been forged in fire, and it would last a lifetime. As the first rays of sunlight bathed the forest, Mark took one last look at Cedar Grove. The shadows that had threatened life and peace were gone for now, but he knew vigilance would always be necessary. He looked at Emily through the ambulance window, then at Rex, standing tall despite his injuries. "We did it," he whispered. "She's safe. You both are heroes." Emily leaned against Rex, whispering softly, "I'll never forget you, Rex. You saved me." The dog gave a gentle nuzzle in response, a silent promise that he would always be there. Mark smiled, heart full of relief and awe. The forest, once dark and menacing, now shimmered with early morning light. Birds began to chirp tentatively, and the fog slowly lifted. For the first time that night, the terror was gone. But the courage, loyalty, and bond forged under the rain, mud, and fear would remain forever. Rex, bloodied, exhausted, and still alert, had proven that bravery could transcend words. Emily, small and fragile, had survived because of instinct, trust, and the heroism of a dog who refused to fail. And Mark Harlan, witness to the courage of both, knew he would never forget this night, the way a dog's loyalty had saved a child's life. As the ambulance carried Emily to safety, Mark and Rex followed side by side through the soft glow of dawn. The forest, the rain, the darkness, they were all behind them now. And though the scars of the night would linger in memory, one undeniable truth shone brighter than fear: courage, loyalty, and love had won. Emily's small voice floated back to him one last time through the ambulance window. "I'm safe, thanks to Rex." Mark glanced down at the dog, eyes full of gratitude and awe. Rex gave a soft, tired bark, tail wagging just slightly, still vigilant, still the protector. The hero of the night, the little girl's guardian, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of bravery are found in those who do not speak, but act with heart. The sun climbed higher, casting the first warmth of day over Cedar Grove. The night's terror had ended, but the story of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog would live forever in the hearts of those who witnessed it. And somewhere deep in the forest, the shadows that had once held fear were now just whispers of the past, unable to touch the girl who had survived, the dog who had saved her, or the man who had witnessed the true meaning of heroism. The night was over, safety had returned, and hope, fragile yet unshakable, glimmered in the morning light.